Today, our continent stands at a crossroads, one that pits dependency against daring, borrowed blueprints against self-belief. And in the heart of West Africa, Burkina Faso just chose the path less traveled, and in doing so, shook the very foundation of what African development is supposed to look like. Imagine this: 500 electric buses, not imported, not assembled from pre-packaged kits, not born from donor-funded fantasy, but built entirely within Burkina Faso. No foreign engineers, no overseas containers, no slick made in Germany or made in China plaques. Just Burkinabe grit, Burkinabe skill, Burkinabe imagination. And the most chilling part, for those who profit from Africa's dependence, no one outside saw it coming. This isn't just an engineering triumph, it's a geopolitical shockwave. For decades, African nations have been told that industrialization must come from outside. Consultants, feasibility studies, capacity building. But here, quietly, patiently, out of the global spotlight, Burkina Faso did what wealthier nations still fumble with. They built a self-sufficient, zero-emission transit system from the ground up. And it wasn't a flashy government PR stunt or a 5-year vision funded by foreign aid. It was the accumulation of sweat equity, decades of local talent cultivation, and a government radical enough to trust its own people. In a continent addicted to development theater, Burkina Faso refused to act. They performed the miracle instead. The heart of this revolution beats in the Ouaga 2000 industrial corridor, once a dusty graveyard of stalled projects and forgotten dreams. Today, it's alive with sparks, schematics, and sheer willpower. Here, you won't find Ivy League grads drawing on whiteboards. You'll find local youth in dusty boots and grease-stained overalls, soldering wires, assembling motors, and rethinking everything we've come to accept as modern transport. Most of them never left their province, let alone the country, but they knew their environment like the back of their hand. They knew how to engineer for survival. Their buses aren't carbon copies of sleek European trams. They're rugged, adaptable, and purpose-built for dusty roads, extreme heat, and a power grid that blinks more than it breathes. And the best part? These machines whisper across streets once choked by diesel fumes. No oil imports, no maintenance monopolies, just clean motion. Engineered, tested, and refined right where they're needed most. And what did they need to achieve this? Not the IMF, not the World Bank, not USAID's latest report. All they needed was space, political space, creative space, the kind of space Africa is rarely allowed to have. President Traoré didn't send delegations to Brussels. He didn't wait for G7 approval. He handed the project to the people, and they delivered. What's unfolding here isn't just about transport. It's about sovereignty, about defiance, about showing a continent what happens when you stop asking for permission to dream, and they're just getting started. This wasn't just a gamble. It was a political rebellion, a deliberate snub to every foreign economist who said it couldn't be done. Advisors warned President Traoré. They said without Western backing, it would be a disaster, that Burkina Faso would be laughed at, that the project would end in ruins and embarrassment. But Traoré didn't blink. He didn't wait for grants or white papers or UN feasibility studies. He listened to his people, not to Washington, not to Paris. The government pulled money from internal revenues, not loans. They laid bricks for domestic factories, not foreign outposts. And they unleashed Burkinabe innovation, no strings attached. Now the proof roars through the streets of Ouagadougou. It's not just a bus, it's a message. Every electric hum that replaces a diesel cough says this: we don't need the world to build our future. What began as a local experiment is now a national symbol, a mobile monument to independence. And just like that, Burkina Faso went from follower to pioneer. But this wasn't the finish line, it was only phase one. Because once you build the bus, the real challenge begins. How do you fuel the fleet without poisoning the very land you're trying to save? Diesel was out, fuel imports were unreliable. The national grid, too fragile. If this was to work and last, the solution had to be as sovereign as the buses themselves. So where do you turn when your soil is poor, but your skies blaze with fire? You look up. Burkina Faso turned to the one energy source it has in abundance: the sun. And what they did next turned the entire energy playbook on its head. They didn't just slap solar panels onto rooftops for show. No, this was deeper. They built a decentralized, purpose-built solar charging network designed specifically for the bus fleet. High-efficiency solar stations now dot the country's transport arteries. These aren't just energy points, they are independence anchors. Buses from the Itowe fleet glide in, charge up in just 30 minutes, and glide back out, powered not by ExxonMobil or Total, but by Burkina-based sunlight. 330 kilometers per charge. No grid dependency, no imported fuel, no waiting lines, just pure, uninterrupted movement, designed and sustained entirely within national borders. And here's the twist. The engineers who created this, the same young minds who once worked on rural electrification microgrids. Traoré didn't just build a transit system, he built a knowledge pipeline. Rural energy projects became the training ground for national energy infrastructure. Local technicians were redeployed, upgraded, and empowered to turn rural know-how into an urban revolution. Now, each solar microgrid isn't just powering lights, it's moving a nation. Burkina Faso has effectively built a parallel energy system, one that doesn't beg for crude from unstable markets or collapse when oil prices spike in Europe. The result? Energy autonomy, economic stability, and a giant leap in public confidence. This is no longer about buses, it's about belief. The belief that a nation once written off can stand tall, powered by its sun, driven by its people, and led by the courage to stop asking permission. Now, thanks to real-time digital integration, passengers know exactly when the next Itowe bus will arrive, down to the minute. This is no longer the guessing game that has defined African public transport for decades. It's efficiency, precision, and dignity on wheels. Transport operators who once emptied their wallets weekly for fuel now pocket those savings. We're talking about tens of thousands of CFA francs per vehicle per week. That's money that now goes into feeding families, buying school books, or even reinvesting in small businesses. Maintenance costs have dropped drastically as well. Electric motors require fewer repairs, no oil changes, no emission system breakdowns. Mechanics, once overwhelmed by imported diesel parts, are now becoming specialists in maintaining sleek, homegrown tech. And let's not ignore what's floating in the air, or rather what isn't. The thick clouds of diesel exhaust that once blanketed intersections in Ouagadougou have thinned out. The harsh rattling of outdated engines has been replaced by the near-silent glide of electric motors. What does that mean for residents? Cleaner lungs, less noise, more peace. But the most powerful shift isn't in the air, it's in the mind. For the first time, citizens of Burkina Faso are witnessing a reality where their daily lives are no longer dictated by fuel prices set in Paris or supply chains that snake through corrupt ports. The state isn't at the mercy of foreign energy dealers anymore. It has reclaimed control, and that is the real revolution. Because here's the part that rattles the old powers. This transformation didn't come with their blessing. It didn't come through loans from the IMF or pledges made on the climate change stage by men in suits. No, this was done quietly, independently, and without compromise. A full-scale solar-powered transport system now exists, not as a feasibility study, but as a living, breathing part of daily life in Burkina Faso. But the ride doesn't stop here. Having built the machines and fueled them without pollution or dependency, the next frontier is intelligence. And this is where the future steps in. These aren't just electric buses, they're smart buses. Each Itowe bus is a rolling piece of data infrastructure. It's equipped not just with GPS, but with an entire operating system that constantly tracks and transmits data to a centralized AI-driven control center. From traffic conditions and average speeds to stop durations and passenger loads, the system adjusts in real time, optimizing routes for maximum efficiency. This is the groundwork for Smart Burkina, a national plan that envisions every part of the country's urban infrastructure communicating and adapting in real time. Buses double as moving sensors. They map traffic congestion, detect slowdowns, and even identify areas needing road repair or additional routes. It's not just public transport, it's a feedback loop that makes the entire city smarter. And the commuter, they're not left behind in this digital wave. Riders can now track buses via mobile apps or SMS updates. Waiting under a hot sun for an unreliable bus? That's yesterday's story. Today they know when and where to stand, how full the next ride is, and when the next one's due. In one of Africa's historically poorest countries, a revolution is taking place. One solar panel, one electric engine, and one algorithm at a time. Not imported, not borrowed, built, powered, and now smartly optimized, all from within. And to the world that once wrote Burkina Faso off, this isn't just a comeback, it's a blueprint. They weren't just impressed, they were inspired. What they saw in Ouaga wasn't just a fleet of buses, they saw freedom, a model of self-reliance so advanced, so unthinkable for a country long labeled one of the world's poorest, that it shattered years of dependency programming in a single visit. And the most controversial part? There were no European consultants explaining the process. No Western logos stamped on blueprints. No Chinese or American technicians hoarding the tech. Everything, from the solar chargers to the data dashboards, was Burkinabe. It was proof that a black nation, without begging, without aid, without compromise, could create and control complex infrastructure on its own terms. Now requests are pouring in. Neighboring nations want to adapt the model. Some are asking for licensing deals. Others want to send their youth for training. A few are even offering to co-develop additional fleets for their own cities. What was born in a quiet corner of Burkina Faso is suddenly being considered a strategic regional export. And not just of hardware, but of knowledge. Yet, this new fame comes with a test. Can Burkina Faso scale its innovation while resisting the very powers that once held it back? Already there are whispers. Western lobbyists unhappy with a transport system that doesn't rely on their oil. Development banks curious and perhaps nervous about a model that proves their expensive aid isn't required. Even global manufacturers are allegedly taking notes, some trying to reverse engineer aspects of the Atawi system. Traoré's administration has stayed firm. No foreign majority ownership, no IP giveaways. If countries want access, they must partner on equal footing. Africa to Africa, South to South, not empire to subject. And here's the irony, a landlocked nation, once thought to be at the mercy of geography, may soon become the epicenter of a new African transport and energy paradigm. Because this isn't just about buses anymore, it's about breaking an old world order. In the corridors of Ouagadougou, something far bigger is unfolding. With every new bus built, every solar station installed, every byte of transit data logged, Burkina Faso is building more than mobility, it's building power. Not the kind that burns in engines, but the kind that rewrites what's possible. And that is exactly why the world should be paying attention. This is not the aid circuit, this is the business table. And Burkina Faso now has a seat with its own nameplate. Think about the symbolism. A country once used as a cautionary tale in economic textbooks is now being approached as a case study in post-colonial industrial independence. That's not just impressive, it's disruptive. For decades, Africa was boxed in by the idea that high-tech manufacturing was only viable with foreign debt, donor grants, or foreign engineers at the helm. But here's Burkina Faso, shattering that illusion with welding sparks and solar panels. And yes, it's making some people uncomfortable. There are murmurs in diplomatic circles about tech nationalism and intellectual protectionism. Some development agencies are quietly expressing concern that Burkina Faso might be turning inward or too independent. But what they really mean is uncontrollable. A country that isn't reliant on their funding, their approval, or their spare parts becomes a threat, not to peace, but to the economic order that kept Africa beneath its potential for decades. That's why the export angle of the Atawi project isn't just economic, it's political. Burkina Faso isn't just selling buses, it's exporting a philosophy, African solutions for African problems by African minds. And the price tag isn't aid, it's partnership. In a continent where cities are choking on diesel fumes, where traffic eats productivity, and where youth unemployment fuels unrest, imagine what it means to say, we can solve this ourselves. That's not just a sale, it's a revolution. The President Traoré knows the challenge ahead. Scaling up too fast can open the door for foreign takeover. Watering down the tech to please buyers risks undermining the original vision. That's why his administration is carefully rolling out a continental licensing framework, offering governments exclusive regional deals, not to sell out, but to scale smart. There's also talk of forming an electric mobility alliance among like-minded African nations, a bloc dedicated to sharing not just vehicles, but data, R&D, and industrial IP. If successful, this could become one of the most powerful transport innovations Africa has ever seen, one built not on charity, but reciprocity. Because in this new model, the continent doesn't just consume, it creates, it owns, it exports. And from the dusty roads of Ouagadougou to the boardrooms of Nairobi, one thing is becoming clear. Africa is no longer asking for a seat at the table. It's building its own. But now Burkina Faso has flipped the script, with 500 zero-emission buses rolling through the Sahel, not because of UN grants or G7 climate deals, but because Africans did it themselves. The continent suddenly holds leverage, real, undeniable leverage. When African leaders walk into the next COP summit, they won't be there begging for loss and damage reparations or carbon credits handed down from the global north like breadcrumbs. No, they'll be asking, why aren't you buying our tech? Because for the first time, it's not just about what Africa needs, it's about what Africa offers. And the symbolism is too strong to ignore. The ITA OUA fleet is no longer just a transportation system. It's a rolling indictment of everything colonial infrastructure failed to deliver. Every time one of those buses glides past the ruins of an abandoned French-built station or rolls down roads once funded by World Bank loans, it quietly says, "We don't need you to save us. We've already started." That's why Traoré's move wasn't just political. It was cultural. It told a new story, one where Black youth aren't just coders for foreign firms, one where Africa's future isn't mined, extracted, and exported raw. One where innovation doesn't trickle down. It rises from the ground up. And now, it's contagious. There are whispers that Côte d'Ivoire wants to co-manufacture a smaller intercity model. Ghana is exploring a solar freight version for port logistics. Even Tanzania and Mozambique are studying the economic model for rural transport electrification. What began in Ouagadougou as an act of defiance has triggered a wave of continental curiosity and maybe, just maybe, solidarity. Because when one African country breaks the rules of dependency and succeeds, others don't just cheer, they take notes. That's what terrifies the old power brokers. Not just that Burkina Faso built electric buses, but that it might become the spark that lights a continent-wide industrial rebellion, powered not by foreign loans, but by African conviction. So when you see one of those buses rolling silently across a dusty road, know this. It's not just carrying passengers, it's carrying a message, a new kind of manifesto. Africa will no longer be driven, Africa will drive. But here's the thing, they're already too late, because what Burkina Faso has built isn't just infrastructure, it's momentum. And momentum, once triggered, doesn't ask for permission. It challenges, it confronts, and it compels. Even if every bus were scrapped tomorrow, the idea has already escaped the factory floor. It's in group chats, college classrooms, startup pitch decks, and late-night policy briefings from Addis Ababa to Johannesburg. That's what makes the ITA OUA model so dangerous to the status quo. It didn't emerge from global development blueprints. It wasn't blessed by Bretton Woods institutions or backed by billion-dollar foundations. It came from below, from dust-covered welders, from barefoot coders, from local technicians with more grit than budget. It is a prototype for something African youth were never supposed to believe, that they can win here. Yes, challenges remain. Scaling operations beyond national borders means navigating customs regimes, standardizing tech protocols, and defending against co-optation by the very forces this model defies. But even these hurdles signal how real this moment is. If it weren't viable, no one would try to stop it. The coming years will reveal whether Burkina Faso can anchor this momentum or whether imitators dilute it. But one thing is certain, the impossibility spell has been broken. Young Africans no longer need to fantasize about Silicon Valley to feel inspired. They have Ouagadougou 2000. They have blueprints, data, and a product rolling through traffic that screams sovereignty, not subsidy. Africa isn't catching up, it's leading. In solar transport and smart mobility, Burkina Faso's dust-brown buses aren't just moving people, they're moving history. Built with Burkinabe hands, not foreign blueprints, the Itoa fleet is a bold answer to decades of dependency. Even if production stopped today, the idea has already gone viral. You can't unsee what independence looks like. The world must now face a new question. If they can build it, why can't we? This is more than innovation, it's transformation. Quiet, solar-powered, unstoppable.